They congratulated my wife at her father's funeral before his coffin hit the ground. 5 days later, she fired me in front of the board she thought she controlled. My son voted for my termination. My wife celebrated in my chair with my father-in-law's scotch. She had no idea what was coming Monday. My name is James Stratton. I'm 47 years old, and I've spent the last 23 years building something I thought would outlast me. Not just a company, a legacy. My father-in-law, Richard Hartley, founded Hartley Medical Systems back in 1981. Medical imaging equipment, diagnostic machinery, the kind of tech that sits in hospitals across 48 states. When I married his daughter Victoria in 2001, I was a systems engineer with a Stanford degree and enough hubris to think I could revolutionize the industry. Richard saw something in me, said I reminded him of himself at 30. He wasn't sentimental about much, but he believed in competence. And I was competent. By 2007, when the company needed capital to survive the financial collapse, I didn't just write a check. I restructured the entire operation, renegotiated supplier contracts, streamlined production, cut overhead by 38% without laying off a single floor worker. Richard called it magic. I called it math. We survived when 3 of our competitors went under. Victoria took credit for supporting the family business. She'd been running the marketing department, which mostly meant approving ad campaigns other people created and attending gallery openings with potential clients. We have 2 kids. Brandon's 22, works in business development at Hartley Medical, his grandfather's idea, not mine. Emily's 19, sophomore at Northwestern studying journalism. Both good kids, though Brandon's got his mother's talent for reading a room and playing to the crowd. Emily's got my stubbornness. Didn't realize how much that would matter until last week. Richard's funeral was on a Thursday. Stage managed like a product launch. Victoria wore Chanel, pearls, that practiced expression of dignified sorrow she'd probably rehearsed in the mirror. The service was at Riverside Memorial, the expensive one with the manicured grounds and the little bridge over the koi pond. 200 people showed up, board members, investors, physicians who'd bought our equipment, politicians Richard had donated to over the years. I counted 14 people who congratulated Victoria before Richard's casket even reached the hearse. 14. Madam CEO, one board member whispered, squeezing her elbow like she'd just won an award. She smiled that corporate smile, the one she used on investor calls. Warm but not too warm. Confident but not arrogant. Practiced. My name wasn't in the program. My chair wasn't in the front row. That was reserved for Victoria, Brandon, and the board chairman. I sat 3 rows back next to Emily, who kept squeezing my hand. She knew. 19 years old, and she could read the room better than her brother ever would. Victoria gave the eulogy, talked about legacy, vision, the future of Hartley Medical Systems. Never mentioned that I'd save the company. Never mentioned the 70-hour weeks I'd put in, the supplier in Munich I'd flown to meet at 2 in the morning because of the time difference, the production line I'd personally redesigned to cut costs without sacrificing quality. Just legacy, vision, future. After they lowered the casket, people formed a receiving line. Victoria stood at the center, accepting condolences like she was accepting an inheritance, which, I suppose, she thought she was. Brandon stood next to her, playing the dutiful son, shaking hands with the same board members who'd forgotten my contributions. Emily stayed with me. Dad, Emily said quietly, why aren't you up there? Because I wasn't invited, I said. She looked at me, those sharp eyes that missed nothing. What's going on? Nothing yet, I told her. But it will. The unraveling started before Richard's body was cold. Monday morning, I tried logging into my email. Invalid password. I reset it, standard IT protocol. But by noon, my access to the financial databases had been revoked. By Tuesday, meeting invitations I'd sent the week before were mysteriously canceled and rescheduled without notification. People stopped CCing me on email chains I'd started. Wednesday morning, I drove to Hartley Medical's headquarters in Foster City like I had for 23 years. My keycard worked at the main entrance, but when I tried accessing the executive floor, the reader blinked red. Denied. Janet, the security supervisor, looked embarrassed. She'd worked there since 1998. Mr. Stratton, I'm sorry, but your executive credentials are under review. IT says it's temporary, just during the transition. Transition to what? I asked her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I don't have details, sir. but I can escort you upstairs if you need. I didn't need an escort in my own building, but I took it. Janet walked me to the elevator, swiped her card, pressed 5. The ride up was silent except for the mechanical hum. When the doors opened, I saw my office, the one I'd occupied since 2004, with the door open and 2 people inside boxing up files. I walked down the hall to the conference room, where our weekly operations meeting was supposed to be happening. Through the glass wall, I saw Victoria at the head of the table. My seat. Brandon sat to her right, taking notes. 8 other executives filled the remaining chairs. My chair wasn't there. They'd removed it. Victoria saw me through the glass. Our eyes met for maybe 3 seconds. Then she turned back to her presentation, gesturing to a slide I'd created last month about Q4 projections. She kept talking. Nobody looked at me. I stood there long enough to feel like a fool, then walked back to my office. The 2 people boxing files stopped when I entered. One was from HR, a kid named Derek who'd been hired 6 months ago. The other was Victoria's assistant, Melissa. Mr. Stratton, Derek said nervously, we're just consolidating some duplicate files for the transition. Those aren't duplicates, I said quietly. Those are originals. The supplier contracts from 2007 to 2012. The patent applications I filed personally. My research notes. Mrs. Stratton requested all executive materials be centralized, Melissa said. Not Victoria. Mrs. Stratton. I picked up a framed photo from my desk. Emily's high school graduation, for years ago. She was wearing her blue gown, holding her diploma, smiling at something I'd said. I put in my briefcase. You can have the rest, I told them. Thursday, they moved my parking spot. I'd had the same space for 15 years. 3rd row, spot 47, right near the south entrance. When I pulled in that morning, there was a Honda Civic in my spot and a new sign, Reserve V. Stratton. My new spot was on the 5th level of the garage. The one where the fluorescent lights flicker and the elevators always broken. I didn't complain. I just parked and walked down 5 flights of stairs. Friday morning, security couldn't find my badge credentials in the system. I'm sorry, Mr. Stratton. The guard said, different guy, younger, didn't know me. You'll need to sign in as a visitor. I signed a clipboard. Visitor. In the company I'd saved. Monday morning came with the kind of silence that precedes storms. I wore a suit. The charcoal Tom Ford Victoria had bought me for our 20th anniversary, back when she still pretended we were partners. I arrived at Hartley Medical at 8:45 a.m., signed in as a visitor for the 5th consecutive day, and took the elevator to the executive floor. The conference room was already occupied. Through the glass walls, I could see the entire board of directors seated around the table. 9 people. Victoria sat at the head, Brandon her right. The chair opposite her, my old position during board meetings, was conspicuously empty. At 9:03 a.m., Victoria's assistant opened the door. Mr. Stratton, they're ready for you. I walked in. Nobody stood. Nobody shook my hand. The board chairman, Thomas Reeves, a man I played golf with for 15 years, gestured to the empty chair. James, please sit, Thomas said. His voice had that practiced gentleness people use before delivering bad news. I sat, looked around the table. Half these people owed their positions to recommendations I'd made. The CFO, Patricia Vaughn, wouldn't meet my eyes. The head of R&D, someone I'd personally mentored, studied his tablet like it contained the secrets of the universe. James, Thomas began, we appreciate everything you've contributed to Hartley Medical over the years. Your technical expertise has been invaluable. Past tense. Always a tell. However, he continued, given the recent organizational restructuring and strategic realignment under Victoria's leadership, the board has made the difficult decision to terminate your position, effective immediately. The room went silent. I counted to 5 in my head. Let the moment breathe. Then I smiled. Not a big smile, just enough to make Thomas's left eye twitch. Of course, I said. I understand completely. Victoria's expression flickered. She'd been expecting something else. Anger, maybe. Pleading. Definitely not agreement. Your severance package is quite generous, Patricia said quickly, sliding a folder across the table. 6 months' salary, continued health benefits for a year, and full vesting of your retirement account. I didn't touch the folder. That's very thoughtful. We'll need your building access credentials and any company property returned by end of business today, Thomas added. Absolutely, I said. I'll have everything to security by noon. Brandon shifted in his seat. He looked uncomfortable, like he was watching something he didn't fully understand. Good. He should be uncomfortable. Is there anything you'd like to say? Victoria asked. Her voice was cool, controlled. CEO voice. I stood slowly, buttoned my suit jacket. Just one thing. Everyone leaned forward slightly. Waiting. Thank you for the opportunity, I said. It's been educational. I walked out before anyone could respond. Didn't slam the door. Didn't look back. Just walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and descended. In my car, my phone buzzed. Text from Emily. Dad, Brandon just texted me. Said they fired you. Are you okay? I typed back, fine. Monday will be interesting. She responded immediately. What happens Monday? Justice, I wrote. But first, I need to pack my office. I went back inside, collected my personal items methodically. The photo of Emily. A paperweight Douglas had given me. A polished piece of titanium from our first successful prototype. My MIT diploma. Nothing else belonged to me anyway. The office felt small or empty. Or maybe I just outgrown it. By 11:47 a.m., I was done. Left my access badge on the desk, my company laptop, my parking pass. Walked out carrying a single cardboard box. The receptionist, Martha, had tears in her eyes. Mr. Stratton, this isn't right. It's exactly right, I told her. Trust me. The house was too quiet when I got home. Victoria's Mercedes wasn't in the driveway. She was still at the office, probably celebrating. But her presence lingered. Fresh flowers in the foyer, the kind she only bought for special occasions. A bottle of Macallan 25 on the bar cart, half empty. Richard's favorite scotch. She'd been toasting her victory. I walked through the house we'd bought together in 2005. 4,000 square feet in Atherton, backing up to the nature preserve. We'd hosted dozens of company dinners here. Richard had sat in the den every Thanksgiving, drinking bourbon and telling stories about the early days of Hartley Medical. That den was where I found her. Victoria sat in my leather armchair. The Eames I'd bought at an estate sale in 2008. The one she'd always said was too masculine for the room. She'd never sat in it before. Not once in 17 years. She had a crystal tumbler in her hand, 2 fingers of that Macallan. Her shoes were off, her stocking feet tucked beneath her. She looked comfortable. Entitled. This is better for both of us, Victoria said without looking up. She swirled the scotch gently. You'll be happier outside the corporate structure. You were never really management material. I set my box down by the stairs. Is that right? You're brilliant technically, she continued, but you lack vision. Strategy. My father saw it too, toward the end. He knew the company needed someone who could think bigger picture. Your father told you that? I asked. He didn't have to tell me, she said. I could see it. The way he started consulting with me more, including me in board discussions. He was preparing me to lead. I walked toward the stairs. Stopped halfway up, turned slightly. Did you ever wonder why he gave me that office safe? I asked. Her hand paused mid-swirl. What safe? The one in my office. The biometric one, key to my thumbprint. Your father installed it personally in 2012. Said it was for important documents. Her expression shifted. Not quite concerned, but close. What documents? Victoria asked. The ones you should have read before you fired me, I said. I continued up the stairs, leaving her sitting in my chair with her dead father's scotch, drunk on power she thought was hers. Behind me, I heard the glass clink against the side table. Heard her stand, her stockings sliding on the hardwood. James, she called up the stairs, what documents? I didn't answer, just walked into my study, closed the door, and called Arthur Hastings, Richard's personal attorney, the one who drafted the documents Victoria didn't know existed. Arthur, I said when he picked up. It's time. Monday, he asked. Monday, I confirmed. 9 a.m. sharp. Sunday evening, I met Arthur Hastings at his private office in Palo Alto. The building was one of those restored Victorians tucked between the glass towers and tech startups. Easy to miss if you didn't know what you were looking for. A brass plate by the door read, Hastings and Associates, Estate Law, in letters so small they discouraged walk-ins. Arthur had been Richard's personal attorney for 43 years. Handled his will, his trusts, the messy divorce from his first wife back in the 80s. When Richard called someone family, it meant something. Arthur was family. He was waiting in his office when I arrived, 71 years old, silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, wearing a cardigan that had probably been expensive in 1987. A battered leather briefcase sat on his desk like a faithful dog. "James," Arthur said, standing to shake my hand. His grip was firm, steady. "I've been expecting this call for 6 years. Richard told you it would come?" I asked. "He told me exactly when it would come," Arthur replied. "He said, when I'm dead and Victoria fires him, that's when you open the vault." He unlocked the briefcase and pulled out a thick leather binder, the kind with brass corners and a clasp that looked like it belonged in a museum. Then came a sealed envelope, red wax seal, my initials pressed into it. Arthur slid them across the desk. "Everything's intact," he said. "I reviewed it again Friday. Not a single document has been challenged or superseded." Richard was meticulous. I opened the binder. Inside were dozens of documents, organized with colored tabs. Transfer agreements, equity purchase contracts. Some dated back to 2007, others more recent. All signed, notarized, witnessed. "The foundational equity transfer," Arthur said, tapping the first section. "When Hartley Medical needed capital in 2007, you provided $12 million. Richard structured it as a stock purchase, not a loan. 29% equity, voting rights included." I remembered that. Victoria had been pregnant with Emily. We'd used my signing bonus from a patent sale, money I'd been saving for a house. Richard had looked me in the eye and said, "This makes you family in the only way that matters." "Over the next 16 years, Arthur continued, "you acquired additional shares through various vehicles. Silent partnerships, custodial accounts, trust structures, all authorized by Richard, all documented." He flipped to another tab, the marital equity clause. "When you married Victoria in 2001, Richard established a spousal protection trust. If the marriage ended, or if there was proven corporate malfeasance affecting family interests, certain shares automatically transferred to the wrong party." "How many shares total?" I asked. Arthur pulled out a spreadsheet, slid it across. Numbers in neat columns. Percentages. Dates. Signatures. 62%, he said. "You control 62% of Hartley Medical Systems voting shares." The room went quiet except for the antique clock on his shelf, ticking like a heartbeat. "She doesn't know," I said. "Nobody knows except you, me, and the trustee at Wells Fargo who manages the holding accounts," Arthur confirmed. "Richard wanted it that way. He called it his insurance policy." "Against what?" "Against his daughter becoming someone he didn't recognize," Arthur said quietly. He loved Victoria, but he saw what she was becoming. Ambitious without substance. Entitled without effort. He told me once, if she tries to erase James, she's erasing the wrong man. I picked up the sealed envelope, broke the wax. Inside was a single sheet of Richard's personal stationery, his handwriting in blue ink. "James, if you're reading this, I'm gone and my daughter has made a terrible mistake. I'm sorry I couldn't fix her. I tried. What I could fix was the company. It's yours now. Don't let her destroy what we built. Richard." I folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope. "What's the plan?" Arthur asked. "Tomorrow morning, we file the notice of extraordinary shareholder meeting," I said. "Clause 12C of the corporate bylaws requires immediate board assembly when majority shareholder demands restructuring review." "They'll fight it," Arthur warned. "Let them," I said. "The documents are airtight." "You made sure of that." Arthur smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from him. "Your father-in-law didn't hire me for my personality. He hired me because I don't lose." We spent the next 2 hours reviewing every document, every signature, every contingency. By the time I left, it was past midnight. The city lights blinked below like a circuit board powering up for battle. I texted Emily. "Tomorrow changes everything." She replied instantly. "Good. Mom's been impossible since the funeral. She's about to get worse." I typed. "Then she's about to get quiet." At exactly 9:01 a.m. Monday morning, the email landed in every board member's inbox simultaneously. Subject line, "Notice of Extraordinary Shareholder Meeting, Clause 12C." I wasn't there to see their faces, but Arthur had described what would happen. The initial confusion. The second read, slower this time. The realization. The email was surgical. To the Board of Directors of Hartley Medical Systems. Per Clause 12C of the Corporate Bylaws, as amended 2012, The undersigned majority shareholder hereby demands an extraordinary meeting to address the following. 1. Immediate dissolution of current executive appointments. 2. Review of all equity distributions and voting rights. 3. Restructuring of board composition and leadership. Meeting convened today, Monday, December 9th, 12 p.m., Executive Boardroom. Attendance is mandatory per shareholder rights. Regards, James Stratton, majority shareholder, Hartley Medical Systems. The attachments were worse. 12 PDF files, each one a legal landmine. Stock transfer agreements. Equity purchase contracts. The trust documentation showing my 62% controlling stake. Notarized, witnessed, dated, unimpeachable. At 9:07, my phone started ringing. Victoria. I didn't answer. At 9:12, Thomas Reeves called. I let go to voicemail. At 9:18, Patricia Vaughn texted, James, we need to talk. This can't be legitimate. I texted back, see you at noon. Arthur called at 9:23. The CFO just contacted me demanding verification. I sent her the Wells Fargo trust statements and the original transfer agreements from 2007. She hung up without saying goodbye. How long until Victoria calls you? I asked. She already did. 3 times. I didn't answer. At 9:31, Emily called. Dad, Brandon just showed up at my apartment. He's freaking out. Says you're trying to steal the company. I'm not stealing anything, I said. I'm taking back what's mine. He says Mom's having a breakdown, throwing things in her office. Emily, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Silence for a moment. Then, I've always trusted you, Dad. You're the only one who's never lied to me. At 10:15, bonded couriers arrived at Hartley Medical Headquarters with physical copies of the notification. Black folders, premium paper, the kind that says this is not negotiable. One for each board member. Hand-delivered, signed receipts required. The receptionist, Martha, told me later that Victoria intercepted hers in the lobby. Open it right there, standing by the artificial ficus tree. Read the first page, then the second. Her face went from confusion to pale recognition. Is this legal? Victoria had asked Martha, as if the receptionist would know. Martha had shrugged. Ma'am, I just answer phones. At 11:03, Victoria's attorney called Arthur. Demanded to know where the shares came from, who authorized the transfers, whether there were any procedural violations. Arthur's response was a masterpiece of legal brevity. Every document was executed by Richard Hartley personally, filed with appropriate regulatory bodies, and held in trust per California corporate law. If you'd like to challenge their validity, I'll see you in court. Otherwise, see you at noon. At 11:47, I arrived at Hartley Medical. Walked through the front entrance. Martha's eyes went wide. Mr. Stratton, she said softly. Should I? No visitor badge today, Martha, I said. Not anymore. I took the elevator to the 5th floor. The executive boardroom doors were closed, but I could see shapes moving inside through the frosted glass. All of them. Every board member. Victoria at the head of the table, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing frantically. I checked my watch. 11:53. At exactly noon, I opened the doors and walked in. The boardroom went silent. 12 people, one empty chair at the head of the table where Victoria stood, and me in the doorway. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. This meeting violates every corporate governance protocol, Victoria said, her voice sharp but controlled. I'm still the acting CEO. No vote can proceed without proper notice and board approval. Margaret Vickers, the trust administrator Richard had hired in 2010, sat at the far end of the table. She was 67, silver hair pulled back tight, reading glasses on a chain. She'd administered the Hartley Family Trust for 14 years and had exactly zero tolerance for nonsense. He holds controlling interest, Margaret said without looking up from the documents in front of her. Per Clause 12C, this meeting is valid. Victoria's hands gripped the back of the chair. That's impossible. The ownership structure is a matter of public record with the SEC, Margaret interrupted. James Stratton owns 62% of voting shares. Has since 2019 when the final trust transfer executed. You own 18% through inheritance. Your son Brandon owns 6%, gifted by his grandfather. Emily owns 7%. The remaining 7% is distributed among non-voting preferred shareholders. Brandon went pale. He'd been scribbling notes on his tablet, but his hand had frozen mid-word. Thomas Reeves cleared his throat. James, surely we can discuss this privately. Come to some kind of arrangement. All in favor of the motion to restructure current executive leadership, Margaret said, cutting him off, in accordance with majority shareholder authority. Nobody moved. The silence stretched like wire about to snap. This is a vote, Margaret continued. Raise your hand if you support the restructuring motion. Patricia Vaughn raised her hand first, then the head of R&D, then 3 others in quick succession. One by one, hands went up. Even Thomas, after a long pause, lifted his hand slowly. Victoria's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She looked around the table at people who'd toasted her appointment 6 days ago. Every single one had their hand raised. Unanimous, Margaret said, making a note. The motion carries. Victoria Stratton is removed from the position of CEO, effective immediately. All interim executive appointments are revoked pending review. This is insane. Victoria finally found her voice. You can't just. I can, I said quietly. And I did. Brandon stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Dad, what are you doing? What your grandfather wanted me to do, I said. What I should have done years ago. You don't even work here anymore, Victoria said, and I could hear the desperation creeping into her tone. I never stopped working here, I corrected. I just stopped pretending you were in charge. Margaret slid a folder across the table toward me. Sign here, Mr. Stratton. These documents formalize your position as chairman and CEO. I walked to the table, took the pen she offered, signed my name on 3 separate pages. The pen made the only sound in the room, scratching across premium paper like a judge's gavel. When I looked up, Victoria was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly. Something closer to disbelief. Like she just discovered gravity worked differently than she thought. The board will reconvene Wednesday at 9 a.m., I said. Patricia, I'll need a full financial review by tomorrow. Thomas, audit the last 6 months of executive decisions. Everyone else, your positions are secure pending performance review. I looked at Victoria. You're welcome to attend Wednesday's meeting as a minority shareholder, but you'll need to sit in the gallery, not at the table. Brandon grabbed his mother's arm. Mom, let's go. Please. For a moment, I thought she might argue, might make a scene. Instead, she picked up her phone and her portfolio, straightened her jacket, and walked toward the door. She stopped next to me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, the same one she'd worn on our wedding day. You planned this, she whispered. All of it. No, I said. Your father planned it. I just executed. She left without another word, Brandon trailing behind her like a shadow. Through the glass wall, I watched them walk to the elevator. Victoria stood perfectly straight, chin up, every inch the CEO she pretended to be. The elevator doors closed, and she was gone. By 4 p.m., the news had leaked. Someone on the board, my money was on Patricia, who'd never liked Victoria, had tipped off a business reporter at the San Francisco Chronicle. The headline hit the website at 4:17. Hartley Medical CO ousted in shareholder coup. Founder's son-in-law takes control. The article was surprisingly accurate. Mentioned the emergency board meeting, the 62% ownership stake, Victoria's removal. What made it viral was the final paragraph. A quote from an unnamed source describing Victoria's termination of me 5 days earlier as the most expensive mistake in Bay Area corporate history. By 4:30, the story had been picked up by TechCrunch and Business Insider. By 5, it was trending on LinkedIn. Someone found our wedding photo. Victoria in that dress she'd spent $18,000 on, me in a rented tux that didn't quite fit. The caption, guess who really married into money? My phone started buzzing around 5:15. Texts from former colleagues, investors, people I hadn't talked to in years. Most were congratulatory. A few were clearly fishing for inside information. Emily called at 5:42. Dad, it's everywhere. Brandon's losing his mind. Mom locked herself in her office and won't talk to anyone. How are you doing? I asked her. I'm good, Emily said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Actually, I'm really good. Grandpa always said you were the smartest person in the room. Guess he wasn't kidding. Your mother made her choice, Emily interrupted. I made mine too. I'm proud of you, Dad. That hit harder than I expected. Thank you, sweetheart. There's something you should know, Emily said. Brandon showed me a memo Mom wrote 6 months ago. She was planning to force you out even before Grandpa died. Had the whole strategy mapped out. 6 months. While Richard was still alive, fighting cancer, Victoria had been planning my removal. Where did Brandon get the memo? I asked. He found it in Mom's office after the board meeting. He's really shaken up, Dad. I think he's starting to realize what she is. At 6:03, Victoria's attorney, a sharp-dressed shark named Preston Hale, sent Arthur a cease and desist letter demanding we retract all slanderous claims and restore Victoria to her position. Arthur responded with a single-sentence email. See you in court, counselor. Bring documentation. The real damage started showing up around 7 p.m. A tech blogger who specialized in corporate drama had somehow obtained an internal email Victoria sent 3 months ago. Subject line, Operational Efficiency Review. In it, she described me as legacy overhead and suggested my technical contributions, while historically significant, no longer align with our strategic vision. Legacy overhead. The man who'd saved the company was overhead. The blogger ran it with the headline, How to Insult Your Majority Shareholder, a case study in corporate stupidity. It got worse. At 7:34, someone leaked a recording from the board meeting where Victoria had fired me. I don't know who recorded it, probably someone's phone under the table, but the audio quality was clear enough. Victoria's voice, cold and corporate. We're terminating your position, effective immediately. Then my response, calm, measured, almost amused. Of course. I understand completely. Monday will be interesting. That clip went viral. By 8 p.m., it had 500,000 views on Twitter. People were making memes. Monday will be interesting became an instant catchphrase for unexpected revenge. At 8:47, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mr. Stratton. A woman's voice, professional but warm. This is Jennifer Cole from 60 Minutes. We'd love to talk to you about doing a segment on corporate governance and family businesses. Would you be interested? Not at this time, I said. But thank you. If you change your mind. I won't, I said, and hung up. The house was quiet when I got home at 9:30. Victoria's car was gone. Her closet was half empty. She'd taken clothes, toiletries, her jewelry box, left everything else. There was a note on the kitchen counter, her handwriting sharp and angry. This isn't over. I crumpled it up, threw in the trash. My phone buzzed. Text from Emily. Mom's at the Four Seasons. Brandon's with her. I'm staying at Sarah's place tonight. Are you okay? I texted back. I'm fine. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be busy. I poured myself 2 fingers of the Macallan, the bottle Victoria had been drinking from, and sat in my chair. My chair in my house, in my company. The silence felt like victory. Wednesday's board meeting started at 9 a.m. sharp. I arrived 15 minutes early, carrying Richard's old leather portfolio, the one he'd used for 40 years, worn smooth at the corners, initials embossed in gold that had faded to bronze. The boardroom felt different now. My name was on the door placard. Chairman and CEO. The chair at the head of the table was mine, not by theft, but by documentation older than Victoria's ambitions. Patricia had the financial review ready. She slid it across the table as board members filed in. 9 people, same faces as Monday, different energy. They knew who was in charge now. Before we begin, I said, I want to address the pension fund. The room went still. Patricia's jaw tightened. Over the past 8 months, I continued, $4.2 million was transferred from the Employee Retirement Fund to a discretionary account labeled Executive Operational Flexibility. Can you explain that, Patricia? She cleared her throat. Those transfers were authorized by the acting CEO as short-term loans to cover cash flow gaps during the transition period. Victoria authorized raiding the pension fund. I asked. She said it was temporary, that the money would be replaced within 60 days. It's been 8 months, I said. Where's the money? Patricia pulled out another folder, slid it to me. Bank statements, wire transfers, a paper trail that led exactly where I thought it would. Victoria had used the pension money to fund consulting contracts with firms that didn't exist. Shell companies. Her personal slush fund. This is embezzlement, Thomas Reeves said quietly. This is federal fraud, I corrected. And every person in this room who knew about it shares liability. I didn't know, Patricia said quickly. I found out Monday when I started the audit. I was going to report it. Were you? I asked. Or were you going to bury it like you buried the other irregularities? Her face went pale. I'm not. You're suspended, I said. Effective now, pending a full investigation. If you cooperated with Victoria's fraud, even passively, you're done. I looked around the table. Anyone else want to confess before the SEC gets here? Silence. Good. Here's what happens next. Every dollar taken from that pension fund gets restored by end of week. I'll cover it personally if I have to, but those 300 employees get their retirement back. Second, we're implementing new financial controls. Every transfer over $50,000 requires dual authorization. Third, Arthur Hastings is conducting a full forensic audit going back 2 years. If he finds more dirt, heads will roll. The meeting continued for 90 minutes. We restructured executive compensation, froze all consulting contracts pending review, and established oversight protocols that should have existed years ago. By the time we finished, the board looked exhausted. One more thing, I said as people gathered their things. Brandon Stratton is terminated from his position in business development. He voted to fire me knowing I was majority shareholder. That's either incompetence or complicity. Either way, he's out. Nobody argued. At 11:30, my phone buzzed. Text from Emily. Dad, Brandon just showed up at my apartment. He's a mess. Crying. Saying he didn't know. That mom told him you were just an employee. What should I do? I typed back. He's your brother. Help him if you want. But he made his choice. He'll have to live with it. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Finally, he said he wants to apologize to you. Tell him I'm at the office, I wrote. If he wants to talk, he knows where to find me. Brandon showed up at 2:15. Martha called from reception. Mr. Stratton, your son is here. Should I send him up? Give me 5 minutes, I said. Then yes. I sat behind Richard's old desk, my desk now, and waited. When Brandon walked in, he looked like he hadn't slept. Red eyes, rumpled shirt, the kind of beaten-down posture that comes from realizing you backed the wrong horse. Dad, he said, standing in the doorway like he wasn't sure he was allowed in. Sit, I said, not unkindly. He sat, hands clasped between his knees, staring at the floor. I didn't know, Brandon said quietly. About the shares, about Grandpa's plan, about any of it. Mom said you were just technical staff, that Grandpa was grooming me to take over eventually. She said firing you was necessary for the company's future. And you believed her, I said. She's my mother, he said, looking up. Why wouldn't I believe her? Because you're 22 years old, not 12, I said. Because you've worked here for 3 years, and you've seen how this company operates. Because you were in those meetings when I presented the R&D strategy, when I negotiated with suppliers, when I saved contracts your mother was about to lose. You saw all of it, Brandon. You just chose not to see. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't restore the pension fund, I said. Sorry doesn't undo voting to fire your own father. Sorry is just a word people use when the consequences show up. I know, he whispered. I leaned back in my chair, studied my son. He looked so much like Victoria. Same bone structure, same way of carrying himself. But there was something of Richard in there too. Maybe something worth salvaging. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're fired from Hartley Medical. That's not negotiable. What you do next is up to you. You can run back to your mother. Let her convince you I'm the villain. Spend the rest of your life blaming me for ruining her coronation. Or you can grow up, learn from this, and figure out what kind of man you want to be. What would Grandpa want me to do? Brandon asked. Your grandfather would tell you that character isn't inherited, I said. It's built, one decision at a time, starting with whether you walk out of here blaming everyone else or accepting that you made a mistake. Brandon stood slowly. Can I call you sometime? Not about work. Just as my dad. You've always been able to do that, I said. You just have to decide if you want to. He nodded, turned toward the door, stopped halfway. Mom's planning something. I don't know what, but she's been on the phone with lawyers all week. She told Tyler that you haven't won yet. Thanks for the warning, I said. After he left, I sat alone in the quiet office. Outside, the sun was setting over Foster City, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Richard used to say that sunset was the best time to make decisions, when the day's noise had faded and you could think clearly. My phone buzzed. Text from Arthur. Victoria's attorney filed an injunction. trying to freeze all corporate decisions pending ownership dispute. Judge threw it out. Said the documentation is too solid to challenge. She's got nothing left. I didn't respond. Just watched the sun slip below the horizon and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. The legacy dinner was my idea. Not a celebration. Richard would have hated that. Just a quiet gathering of the people who'd built Hartley Medical before it became a brand, back when it was just an idea in a workshop in San Mateo. We held it at the Rosewood Hotel in Menlo Park, private dining room, 60 people. Engineers who'd worked the first production line. The sales rep who'd landed our first hospital contract in 1984. The regulatory specialist who'd gotten our imaging system FDA approved when everyone said it was impossible. Richard's original investors, the ones who believed in him when medical equipment meant bedpans and thermometers, not diagnostic machinery that saved lives. I didn't invite Victoria. She wasn't on the guest list because she'd never been part of the building, only the taking. The room was warm, understated. String quartet playing something classical, but not stuffy. Linen tablecloths, simple flower arrangements, the kind of evening Richard would have approved of. No press, no photographers, no performance. Just the right people saying the right things. I stood to speak around 8:30, after dinner, but before dessert. The room quieted. Richard Hartley built something that mattered, I said. Not because it made money, though it did, but because it solved problems. When a hospital in Des Moines needed imaging equipment they could afford, Richard made it affordable. When a clinic in rural Montana needed parts, Richard made sure they got them. He didn't build this company for legacy. He built it because people needed what we made. I looked around the room. Gray hair, lined faces, people who remembered when success meant shipping 5 units in a month instead of 500. Some people inherit titles. I continued. Others inherit responsibility. Richard knew the difference. That's why he trusted the company to people who understood what building actually means. Not the marketing, not the brand positioning, not the quarterly earnings calls. The work. The actual work. Quiet applause. Genuine and warm. These weren't people who clapped for performance. They clapped for truth. After the speech, I worked the room. Shook hands. Heard stories about Richard I'd never heard. The engineer who remembered Richard personally rewiring a prototype at 2 a.m. because the contractor had done it wrong. The accountant who recalled Richard taking a pay cut during the recession so they wouldn't have to lay off assembly workers. Your father-in-law was the real deal, one of the original investors told me. Rare breed. Cared more about the work than the credit. I'm glad he trusted you with this. So am I said. At 9:40, I stepped outside for air. The hotel's garden was quiet, just the sound of water from a fountain and the distant hum of traffic on 101. I loosened my tie, breathed in the cool November air. Dad, I turned. Emily stood in the doorway, backlit by the warm glow from inside. I thought you were at school, I said. I drove down, she said, walking over. Couldn't miss this. Grandpa would have wanted me here. We stood together in the garden, father and daughter, watching the fountain recycle the same water in endless loops. Mom called me today, Emily said. Wanted me to convince you to settle. Said she'd drop all the legal challenges if you gave her a seat on the board and a consulting position. What did you tell her? I told her that Grandpa didn't leave her the company because she never learned to build, only to take. Then I hung up. I put my arm around her shoulders. That was harsh. That was honest. Emily corrected. There's a difference. Inside, the quartet started playing again. Someone laughed, the sound carrying through the open door. What happens now? Emily asked. With the company, with Mom, with everything. Now we build, I said. Same thing we've always done. We make equipment that works. We pay our people fairly. We honor the pension fund. And we remember why Richard started this in the first place. And Mom, your mother has 18% of a company she tried to steal, I said. She'll get dividends, attend shareholder meetings, and live comfortably. But she'll never run Hartley Medical. That ship sailed the day she fired me. Good, Emily said quietly. We walked back inside together. The party continued until just past 11, people drifting out in pairs and small groups, promising to stay in touch, to remember the old days, to honor what Richard had built. By 11:30, it was just me and Arthur Hastings, sitting in the empty dining room with cold coffee and the satisfaction of a job well done. Richard would be proud. Arthur said. Richard made this possible, I said. I just followed his instructions. You did more than that, Arthur countered. You protected what he built. That's worth something. 8 months later, Hartley Medical announced its most profitable quarter in company history. We'd restored the pension fund, renegotiated supplier contracts, and landed 2 major hospital networks. Brandon had enrolled in a graduate program at Berkeley, studying business ethics of all things. He called every Sunday. We were working on it. Victoria settled in Santa Barbara, consulting for medical startups, using her maiden name professionally. Hartley Consulting. She tried to build her own legacy, separate from the company she'd lost. I heard she was moderately successful. I didn't follow too closely. Emily finished her journalism degree and joined the company's communications department. Not because I gave her the job, but because she earned it. Richard would have liked that. Sometimes late at night in my office, I'd sit in the chair Richard had used and think about the choice he'd made all those years ago. Trusting me with his company instead of his daughter. Building protections she never knew existed. Planning for a future where competence mattered more than blood. He'd seen something in me I hadn't seen in myself. Or maybe he'd just seen Victoria clearly and made the only choice that made sense. Either way, Hartley Medical System survived. Not because of a name or a legacy or an inheritance. Because of the work. The actual work. And that, I thought, was exactly how Richard would have wanted it.